Welcome to the Chemistry Cooking Show. Come along with us as we make some pickles and shed a little light on preservatives and how they work.
First, I'll slice my pickles and set that aside while I make my brine. I'm just going to mix my water, rice vinegar, sugar, salt, and pepper, and stir until it's dissolved. Pickling is a historical preservation method that was invented around 2400 BC in ancient Mesopotamia, and likely originated when food was placed in wine or beer for preservation. Now that my brine is ready, I'll place my pickles in the jar and cover it with brine, and then top it with my dill and garlic. Let's learn a little bit more about other preservation methods. Methods of preserving food have been a part of every culture during nearly every time period. When you think of preservatives, you probably think about factories and prepackaged meals, but methods of preservation were around long before. Some other forms of preservation are drying, fermenting, and curing. A modern example of drying is dried mango, but cultures in the Middle East and Asia are thought to have been drying foods as early as 12,000 BC in the hot sun. Fermentation was discovered around 10,000 BC in the Middle East. People found that it made food more desirable and nutritious. Fermentation is also used in the production of alcohol. The first alcoholic beverage was made in China around 7000 BCE using rice, honey, and fruit. For those of you over 21, a fermented item you might come across often is beer, which is made from fermented barley. The earliest form of curing came in the form of dehydration. The process of curing via dehydration used salts. Use of different salts led to the discovery that certain salts made meat red instead of gray. This increased consumer appeal, and the process grew in popularity. The red color was maintained in the meat because salts were nitrates that inhibited the growth of Clostridium botulinum, which is a type of bacteria that caused the grain. During the 19th century, more modern forms of food preservation were adopted, like freezing via refrigeration. Though natural forms of refrigeration, like use of cellars and caves, have been around for much longer, modern techniques of keeping food fresh via modern freezing techniques were first developed around the mid-1800s, but were not widely used until the 20th century. Refrigeration works by decreasing the temperature so that microorganisms and bacteria can't grow. Now, what about more modern preservatives?
After looking at the history of preservatives, specifically more of the ancient past, it's time to look at the timeline of one of the more modern preservatives. As you look around the kitchen around me, even though you can't really see the food because of the angle, there's lots of foods here that use modern preservatives that were developed in the last century. Take, for example, this milk jug here, inside that contains milk, specifically pasteurized milk. All milk and milk products are required by the FDA to be pasteurized. A process developed in the mid-19th century after this man named Louis Pasteur, the man we went over in class. This process treats foods such as milk with mild heat, which is less than 100 degrees Celsius, for at least 30 minutes. This process deactivates spoilage enzymes and kills microorganisms such as bacteria. This results in raw milk having a shelf life of 7 days and pasteurized milk lasting around 10 to 21 days.
Hi Samuel, thank you for your lecture on milk. But what if I don't like my milk to be refrigerated? What if I just love room temperature milk?
Hi alternate Samuel. First of all, it's important to acknowledge that nobody asked. Some preferences are just wrong, but great question. In fact, when you take a trip across the Atlantic Ocean, you will realize that in Europe, many milks are stored at room temperature. So in North America, countries like the US and Canada will use a pasteurization technique called high temperature short time pasteurization, or HTST. This pasteurization technique is relatively cheaper and can process a higher volume of liquids, such as milk. And in Europe, they use a technique called ultra-high temperature pasteurization, which by its name you can tell it's higher in temperature, but can also enable a longer shelf life, and also more importantly, at room temperature. This is more important in countries that don't have a large percentage of refrigeration, or a way to help them store milk safely. But it runs deeper than that. Here we have this almond milk, or should I say almond beverage, that has a very special form of packaging. This is called aseptic processing. So this is a process developed in 1914 to mass sterilize liquids in a tubular heat exchangers. So this entire process is conducted in a sterilized environment, which was eventually applied to many products like this one here. So aseptic box, which this is what you're looking at, this drink box, was introduced to the US market in 1981. And this allowed beverages to be shelf life stable for months. This can be seen in many liquids, as I shown here, but also in stuff such as like orange juice in juice boxes that can be packaged through aseptic processing and can be shelf life stable because of the sterile nature of their packaging.
Moving forward in time, the dawn of the 20th century brought the discoveries and creations of the most common preservatives used today. Nitrates and nitrites are commonly used as preservatives today. They are found mainly in processed meats, as shown here. Let's take a look at one of these products. As you can see, it has sodium nitrite in it. Nitrites and nitrates prevent bacterial growth, improve flavor, and help retain color. As previously mentioned, salt combined with saltpeter had been used for thousands of years to cure and preserve meats. This was due to nitrates present in the saltpeter that would prevent bacterial growth. In the late 1800s, German scientists began researching saltpeter as a curing agent and found that nitrite was the real curing agent, not nitrate. But there was ongoing public concern about the toxicity of nitrite and its use in food. However, the events of World War I forced the use of potassium nitrite instead of saltpeter, since saltpeter had to be reserved for making gunpowder. And before the end of the war in 1917, nitrite was already being used all over Europe and the US for curing. Alright, let's head over to the next preservative. Now we have benzoates. Benzoates, which are another abundantly used preservative today, also started being used in the early 1900s as a food preservative. Sodium benzoate is mostly used for acidic food products like sodas, jams, and dressings. Here's an example. I have this soda here. As you can see, it has sodium benzoate in it as a preservative. Alright, let's go to the last preservative. Our last preservative we're going to talk about is BHA and BHT. BHA and BHT have a more synthetic beginning. Both compounds were synthesized in the late 1940s and soon began being used as food preservatives. They are mainly favorable due to their antioxidative properties that help keep food looking and tasting better for longer. They are usually used together and can be found in countless food products, especially products like processed foods, snacks, and cereals. Here's an example. We have BHT added to preserve freshness. And we have this gum here as well. As you can see, it has BHT to maintain freshness.
Good afternoon, class, and welcome to Chem 101P, Chemistry of Modern Preservatives. Nitrates and nitrites have antioxidant and antimicrobial properties that are used to cure meats. Nitrites and protons from water form nitrous acid. Nitrous acid breaks down into water and dinitrogen trioxide. Dinitrogen trioxide further breaks down into nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide. When lipids oxidize, they form a rancid flavor causing spoiling. Nitric oxide prevents oxidation by reacting with oxygen and free radicals and stops the spread of spoiling from one lipid to the next. Benzoates, or more commonly sodium benzoates, have antibacterial and antimicrobial agent. They're usually added to foods that already have an acidic environment to preserve the acidity. It is the salt of the conjugate base of benzoic acid. When added to food, it converts to benzoic acid, lowering the overall pH. Proteins need specific conditions to function. Lowering the pH denatures and inhibits the function of said proteins, leading to the death of the microorganism. There's BHA and BHT, which are some of the most widely used in the whole industry. They're added to a variety of foods, including beer, butter, cereals, and chips, just to name a few. Similar to nitrites, they prevent oxidation and react with free radicals. However, they're not nearly as reactive as nitrites, so they won't have any unwanted interactions. And in fact, it's preferential that they bind with the oxygen over fats and oils. If there's no questions, that's all for today's lecture.
It's been a while, and I think our pickles are almost done. Let's chat a bit more about preservatives and then try them. So, are preservatives bad for you? The answer is a little more complicated than yes or no. Preservatives simply prevent food from spoiling too quickly. As you've learned, there are many types and applications, so simply saying all preservatives are bad for you is jumping the gun a little bit. Let's focus about the ones we've talked about on today's show. BHA and BHT are approved by the FDA at low concentrations, about 200 parts per million, but they're listed as possible carcinogens by the US National Institute of Health. This designation as a possible carcinogen is evidenced by studies conducted in animals. But there are conflicting studies that claim that BHA and BHT could potentially have anti-tumor effects at higher doses. Confusing, right? Similarly, benzoate has some mixed opinions. Some scientists think that benzoate could be harmful due to its ability to react and form benzene. Its weak genotoxic effect and its oxidative stress could affect people's immune system, liver, kidneys, and fertility. But others say that it could be a possible treatment for nervous system disorders. And with no surprise, nitrates and nitrites also have mixed opinions. When exposed to high heat in the presence of amino acids, nitrates and nitrites form nitrous amines, many of which could be carcinogenic. This proves an issue because nitrates are often used in the preservation of meats, which are often exposed to high temperatures while cooking. And the possible upsides? Well, some scientists think that nitrates and nitrites could lower blood pressure when used in low amounts. At the end of the day, opinions on chemical preservatives are rather mixed. It's up to you as the consumer to decide what you put in your body. Let's check in on our pickles. It looks pretty delicious to me. I'm gonna make myself a sandwich. Well, hopefully today's segment on preservatives has shed a little light on what's going on in your food when you look at the label on the back of your snacks. So, until next time, see you. Bye.